The hidden triggers of baby anxiety. Anxiety in babies is often misunderstood, and because they cannot explain what they feel, parents are left searching for reasons. Many conclude it is just a matter of personality, that their baby is more restless, sensitive, or demanding than others. Yet modern neuroscience and developmental psychology reveal a deeper truth. Much of what we call fussiness, resistance to sleep, or unexplained crying comes not from the child's temperament alone but from hidden details in the environment. These details act as silent triggers of stress, shaping the baby's emotional state before words, before reasoning. And often without parents realizing, a baby does not experience the world through logic or language. Their primary tools for survival are their senses. Every sound, light, smell, and touch is processed directly by the nervous system, leaving physiological imprints. What may feel neutral to an adult, like a flickering fluorescent light, a television running in the background, or a fabric that scratches slightly against the skin, can register as loud and overwhelming to a baby's developing body. These micro-stressors are subtle but powerful. They accumulate throughout the day, and when the nervous system is unable to regulate, they spill over into crying, shallow sleep, or sudden irritability. The baby is not misbehaving. The baby is overwhelmed. Scientific studies back this understanding. Environmental psychology shows that spaces filled with clutter, noise, or abrupt sensory changes raise cortisol levels in children. Cortisol is the stress hormone, and in a developing brain it plays a major role in shaping how emotional responses will be wired for life. When elevated too often, it leaves traces of anxiety imprinted on the nervous system. This means that the room where your baby spends most of their time is not neutral. It is actively shaping their ability to calm down, to trust, and to feel safe in the world. Imagine a baby placed in a nursery where toys are scattered in every corner. Bright colors fight for attention on the walls, and sounds of conversation or electronics create constant background activity. For an adult, this might simply feel busy. For a baby, it is sensory chaos. The brain cannot filter, cannot prioritize, cannot rest. Now compare this with a space that offers order, toys arranged in accessible baskets, soft and balanced colors that invite the eye to rest, lighting that shifts with the time of day, and moments of silence, interrupted only by gentle, predictable sounds. The difference is not decorative, it is neurological. One space teaches the nervous system to remain in alert mode, while the other teaches it to breathe. This hidden architecture of stress extends even to factors parents rarely consider. The air quality of a room, the smell of detergents, the placement of furniture all send silent messages to the child's body. A draft of cold air at night, a chair placed in the way of natural movement, or a fragrance lingering too strongly in the air can disturb the delicate sense of security. Babies thrive on predictability, not perfection. What disrupts their balance is inconsistency. Light that is too harsh at bedtime, sounds that spike suddenly, or visual fields that never allow rest. These elements do not announce themselves loudly, yet they shape the emotional climate in which a baby learns to exist. One of the most fascinating insights from neuroscience is that the baby's body keeps the score of these daily exposures. Elevated heart rates, irregular breathing, difficulty transitioning into deep sleep cycles, these are the physical fingerprints of environmental triggers. Parents may interpret them as personality traits, but they are often the nervous system's response to surroundings. When caregivers begin to notice these patterns, the path to transformation opens. Adjusting the environment reduces the invisible weight pressing on the baby, and the child begins to unfold into calmness naturally. This perspective transforms how we see childcare. It is not only about feeding schedules, emotional presence, or developmental milestones, but also about the invisible world of sensory messages. Recognizing hidden triggers allows parents to move from reaction, trying to soothe a crying baby without knowing why, to prevention, by cultivating spaces that whisper safety and predictability. The baby's calm is no longer a mystery but a result of intentional choices in the environment. When these hidden triggers are removed, parents often report astonishing changes. Babies sleep longer, cry less, and engage more with their surroundings. They are not learning new behaviors. They are simply released from the constant burden of environmental stress. What seemed like a restless temperament becomes a peaceful personality, not because the baby has changed, but because the world around them has. This is the foundation of conscious parenthood, realizing that the environment is not a backdrop, but the first co-parent in your child's emotional life. Understanding hidden triggers of baby anxiety is an act of awareness and love. It shifts the narrative from blaming the child or the parent to recognizing the silent role of space itself. A room can create stress or it can heal. Every decision, how much light, what kind of sound, which textures, the presence of order or chaos becomes a language. When spoken with intention, this language tells the baby, you are safe, you are calm, you are held. And in that safety, the child's true essence has room to grow. The science of sensory imprinting. From the very first moment of life, the human brain begins an extraordinary process, registering every sensory impression as if the world were writing its story inside the body. This process, known as sensory imprinting, is particularly intense during infancy, when the nervous system is still raw, unfiltered, and exquisitely sensitive. A baby does not yet possess the cognitive tools to interpret or rationalize what happens around them. They cannot separate what is external from what is internal. For them, the environment is not an accessory. It is the very fabric of their experience. Neuroscientists describe the first 1,000 days of life as a window of profound vulnerability and potential. During this period, neural connections form at a speed never again repeated. Every sensory input, sounds, lights, touches, smells, becomes part of the architecture of the brain. It is as if each detail of the environment leaves fingerprints on the nervous system, shaping how the child will perceive and regulate emotions for the rest of their life. Unlike adults, who can ignore, filter, or reinterpret external stimuli, infants are pure receivers. They absorb directly, and what they absorb becomes the foundation of who they are becoming. Consider what happens when a baby is raised in a home filled with irregular rhythms, television always on in the background, harsh artificial lights at night, strong smells of cleaning products, cluttered rooms with too many visual distractions. These conditions may appear harmless to adults, yet scientific studies show they elevate cortisol levels in children, interfere with sleep cycles, and disrupt the early establishment of secure attachment. The child's nervous system is trained to remain in a state of hypervigilance. That vigilance, repeated daily, is imprinted into neural patterns that will influence attention, mood, and resilience throughout life. Now imagine another scenario, a home where lighting follows the natural rhythm of day and night, where silence is valued and complemented with predictable sounds like soft music or the rustle of leaves, where textures are pleasant and breathable, and where spaces are intentionally organized to minimize visual chaos. In this environment, the baby's nervous system receives sensory codes of predictability and safety. Studies in developmental psychology reveal that such children show greater capacity to self-soothe, longer sleep cycles, and lower baseline stress levels. The difference lies not in genetics or chance, but in the imprints formed by sensory experiences. What makes sensory imprinting so powerful is its invisibility. Parents often overlook the fact that the small daily exposures, like the flicker of a screen, the sudden sound of a closing door, or the texture of a blanket, carry more weight in a baby's development than isolated grand events. The nervous system doesn't need trauma to record stress. It simply responds to repetition. What is repeated is what becomes the baseline. If peace is repeated, calm becomes the default. If chaos is repeated, restlessness becomes the default. There is also a deeper spiritual dimension to this science. Ancient traditions always emphasize the sacredness of the first years of life, recognizing that the soul of the child is open and permeable to the atmosphere around them. Today, neuroscience provides the biological explanation for what spiritual wisdom intuited. The baby is imprinted not only by what is visible, but by the emotional tone of the environment. A rushed, anxious household creates sensory codes of tension, while a mindful, intentional household communicates security. The practical implication of sensory imprinting is that every choice matters. The choice of light bulbs, the arrangement of toys, the kind of fabrics used in bedding, the decision to allow or reduce background noise, all are shaping your child's emotional architecture. Parents often wonder why their baby resists sleep, struggles with feeding, or cries without clear cause. Sensory imprinting provides part of the answer. The environment may be sending contradictory or overwhelming signals, and the baby's body is simply responding truthfully. When caregivers become conscious of this principle, they move from a reactive posture trying to manage crises to a proactive posture, designing daily life with awareness. By aligning the sensory environment with calm and predictability, they reduce the invisible stressors that overload the baby. The results often feel miraculous. A child who once seemed anxious now sleeps more deeply, smiles more easily, and engages with curiosity. The change is not in the child's nature but in the sensory language that now affirms safety. Instead of confusion, the science of sensory imprinting teaches us that love is not only expressed in words or actions, but also in the silent design of space. Babies are not only listening to your voice or feeling your touch, they are recording the entire atmosphere in which they live. Every sound, every shadow, every texture becomes part of their inner world. To create an environment with intention is to gift your child a nervous system trained in serenity, resilience, and trust. And that is one of the greatest legacies a parent can offer: the invisible architecture of stress. Stress is not only born from emotional conflicts or dramatic events. It can be built silently through the very structure of the environment where a baby lives. This is the essence of neuroarchitecture, the study of how space influences our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. For infants, whose nervous systems are still raw and deeply impressionable, the architecture of stress is often invisible, yet constantly active. The way furniture is arranged, the choice of materials, the circulation of air, the amount of light, even the acoustics of a room, all of these are silent forces shaping whether a child feels safe or unsafe. Imagine entering a room where furniture is bulky, placed in a way that blocks natural flow, where harsh lights cast shadows in every corner, and where sound echoes instead of softening. As an adult, you may adjust and ignore these discomforts. But for a baby who has no filter, no way to reason, no escape, such an environment whispers danger. Their heart rate increases, their breathing becomes shallow, and their body enters a subtle state of fight or flight. This is not a conscious decision, but an instinctive reaction. Their biology reads the environment as either safe or unsafe, and the architecture itself becomes a messenger. Scientific studies in environmental psychology confirm that physical space directly affects cortisol levels and emotional regulation. Open spaces with natural light tend to reduce stress markers, while closed, dark, and disorganized environments elevate them. Babies, being pure receivers of sensory information, are especially affected. The corners of a room, the patterns on the walls, the pathways of movement, these are not neutral backdrops. They are silent scripts, telling the baby whether they can rest or whether they must remain on guard. One of the most overlooked aspects of this invisible architecture is visual lines. When a baby looks up and sees clutter, chaos, or overwhelming contrasts, their nervous system interprets it as unpredictability. On the other hand, when they look and see harmony, balance, and order, they register stability. This doesn't mean sterile, empty rooms. It means spaces that speak the language of clarity. Even the positioning of a crib matters. A baby who sleeps with constant shadows crossing their view may rest less deeply than one placed where light is softer and more predictable. Acoustics also play a crucial role. A room that echoes or amplifies sound makes every noise larger than life. For a baby whose auditory system is extremely sensitive, such environments feel like living inside a drum. They cannot turn the volume down. They endure it. Over time, their nervous system adapts by becoming hyper-alert, constantly scanning for the next noise. This adaptation is often mistaken for an anxious temperament, when in fact it is the result of living in an anxious space. The architecture of stress is invisible precisely because parents may not associate design with emotion. They may see a beautiful nursery on the surface, but not realize that its arrangement or sensory elements are sending contradictory signals. A room filled with stimulating colors, oversized furniture, and constant artificial light might look stylish but function as a stress machine for the child. Form without awareness creates fragility, not safety. Now, think of a space designed with flow. Natural light enters softly. Materials are breathable. Textures are pleasant. Furniture is arranged in a way that creates clear movement, not obstacles. Acoustics are softened by fabrics or natural elements. This environment whispers trust. It doesn't demand attention. It invites rest. The nervous system of the baby records this as a baseline. The world is safe. I can relax. Over time, these repeated signals form a strong foundation for emotional regulation. This invisible architecture is powerful because it teaches parents to shift perspective. It's not just about what looks good in a photo. It's about what feels safe in the body. Babies don't judge style. They register signals. The room is not decoration, but communication. Understanding this truth empowers. caregivers to transform anxiety into peace by reshaping the very spaces where their children live. The architecture of stress shows us that the first environment a child knows is not neutral. It is a silent partner in their emotional development. By becoming conscious of this, parents stop blaming themselves or their child for restlessness and begin addressing the real architect of anxiety, the space itself. And when space changes, behavior changes. The invisible becomes visible, and stress is replaced with serenity, visual chaos, and the baby's nervous system, of all the senses. Vision has one of the strongest impacts on how babies experience the world. From the moment they begin to open their eyes, the surrounding environment imprints itself through shapes, contrasts, and colors. What many parents don't realize is that visual chaos is not harmless. It directly influences the nervous system, creating either calm or anxiety. For a baby who cannot filter or rationalize visual input, a room filled with excessive patterns, clashing colors, and clutter is like a storm that never ends. Neuroscientific research confirms that cluttered visual environments elevate cortisol, the body's stress hormone. Adults often feel fatigue in messy spaces, but they can compartmentalize and regulate. Babies cannot. Their nervous system interprets the excess as instability. Every toy scattered on the floor, every overstimulating pattern on the wall, every bright and flashing image contributes to a field of unpredictability. And for an infant, unpredictability is perceived as danger. The result is restlessness, shallow sleep, and heightened irritability. Imagine placing a baby in a room where the walls are covered with bold patterns. Toys of every color spill from shelves, and electronic devices flash or flicker constantly. The infant's eyes move rapidly, scanning without pause. There is no moment of rest, no visual anchor. The nervous system works overtime, processing input after input, unable to pause. This constant activation creates what psychologists call sensory overload. Overload is not dramatic at first. It builds quietly until it manifests as crankiness, resistance to feeding, or trouble falling asleep. Contrast this with a room designed for visual balance. The walls carry soft, neutral tones that create harmony. Toys are intentionally organized in baskets, accessible but not overwhelming. Surfaces are clear, allowing the eyes to find rest. Natural light moves gently across the space without harsh shadows. In this environment, the baby's nervous system receives signals of order. Their gaze slows, their breathing deepens, and the body interprets the space as safe. Scientific studies show that children in organized, minimally cluttered environments demonstrate higher focus, longer play cycles, and lower baseline stress levels. What parents often mistake as fun decoration can, in truth, be a subtle source of stress. Brightly colored mobiles, walls covered with bold cartoon images, or an abundance of stuffed animals may stimulate the adult sense of style, but for the infant, they are signals of overstimulation. Babies need stimulation, yes, but in doses and rhythms that align with their nervous system's capacity. Too much stimulation too often creates agitation rather than curiosity. There is also an emotional dimension to visual chaos. When a space feels overwhelming, the caregiver often mirrors that overwhelm. Parents in messy, overstimulating environments tend to feel less grounded, more rushed, and more anxious themselves. The baby, attuned to the caregiver's energy, absorbs this emotional state along with the sensory overload. The environment then becomes a cycle of stress. Clutter creates restlessness in the parent. Restlessness amplifies tension in the child, and the child's agitation makes the parent feel even more overwhelmed. The loop repeats. Breaking this cycle begins with awareness. When caregivers recognize that visual chaos is not just about tidiness, but about neurobiology, they begin to design differently. Removing excess toys, choosing calmer color palettes, and simplifying visual lines are not acts of minimalism for aesthetics, they are acts of love for the nervous system. A simplified space allows the baby to focus, to play more deeply, and to rest more fully. The mind can wander without being hijacked by constant input. Visual calm doesn't mean sterile emptiness. It means balance. A single focal point, like a soft artwork or a window view, can anchor the baby's gaze and provide orientation. Simple contrasts, like light and shadow, help develop visual perception without overwhelming the senses. By intentionally curating what the baby sees, caregivers communicate the message: the world is safe, predictable, and inviting. When babies grow in visually chaotic environments, Their nervous systems learn to stay alert. When they grow in visually calm environments, they learn to trust. This difference, repeated over days and months, shapes not only mood but emotional development. The choice of how a room looks is, therefore, not cosmetic. It is neurological care. A clear space equals a clear signal of safety. And safety is the foundation upon which all future learning and connection are built. The impact of background noise. Sound is one of the most underestimated influences on a baby's emotional life. Adults have learned to tune out certain noises: the hum of the refrigerator, the constant chatter of a television, the faint buzz of a phone vibrating on the table. We filter what we don't want to hear. Babies do not. Their auditory system is wide open, absorbing everything with equal intensity, without the cognitive ability to choose what to ignore. That means what we call background noise is not in the background for them, it is front and center, shaping their nervous system every second. Research in pediatric psychology demonstrates that infants exposed to constant background television not only show difficulties in sleep regulation, but also in attention span and language development. Even if the child appears not to be watching, the brain still processes the shifting sounds and rhythms, leaving less space for calm and focused play. The nervous system remains on alert, scanning, decoding, reacting. This invisible vigilance translates into a restless body, shallow sleep, and an underlying sense of insecurity. Noise pollution has been studied extensively in urban environments. Children living near airports or highways consistently show higher stress levels and reduced cognitive performance compared to peers in quieter areas. If this is true for older children, how much more intense must the effect be on infants whose auditory pathways are still wiring themselves? Every sudden horn, every burst of laughter from a television show, every door slammed shut is recorded as a microshock. These shocks may be small individually, but together they weave a pattern of tension that defines the baby's baseline state. It is important to understand that babies do not crave absolute silence. Total silence can be unfamiliar and even unsettling, especially for newborns who are accustomed to the constant rhythmic sounds of the womb heartbeat, blood flow, muffled voices. What babies need is consistency and predictability in sound. White noise, gentle lullabies, the sounds of water or rustling leaves, all these recreate the kind of auditory environment that communicates safety. The difference is that these sounds are rhythmic and stable, not chaotic and intrusive. Parents often report that their babies calm down when the vacuum cleaner is running or when placed near a washing machine. These sounds are not magical in themselves. They are simply predictable, constant, and low in variation. The nervous system interprets them as steady, which allows the baby to release vigilance. By contrast, a room with a television in the background, conversations overlapping, and irregular noises creates an unpredictable landscape that keeps the nervous system primed for alarm. Caregivers who design auditory environments intentionally are not just creating comfort, they are shaping neurological resilience. Babies raised in environments where sound is predictable and gentle learn to regulate emotions more effectively. They develop stronger focus, better sleep patterns, and lower baseline anxiety. Sound is not a detail, it is a foundation. And when we reduce background noise and replace it with intentional auditory signals, we teach the child, the world is steady. You can rest. Light as an emotional compass. Light is not only about visibility. For the human body, and especially for infants, light functions as an emotional compass. It guides the circadian rhythm, influences hormone production, and tells the nervous system when it is time to be alert and when it is time to rest. When this compass is disrupted by artificial light at night, excessive brightness at inappropriate hours, or lack of exposure to natural light, the baby's body loses its sense of rhythm. Anxiety and restlessness are the natural consequences. Studies in chronobiology have shown that babies exposed to natural light cycles develop healthier sleep patterns, more stable moods, and stronger immune systems. By contrast, infants raised in environments where light does not follow the natural rhythms, such as rooms with bright LEDs at night or complete lack of daylight during the day, struggle with irregular sleep, higher irritability, and difficulty calming down. Their bodies simply do not know what time it is. Without cues from light, the nervous system drifts into confusion. Consider the example of parents who keep bright overhead lights on during evening routines. They may believe they are helping the child stay awake longer, but what they are actually doing is tricking the baby's body into thinking it is still daytime. Melatonin, the hormone responsible for inducing sleep, is suppressed by bright artificial light, especially in the blue spectrum emitted by screens. The result is a baby who fights sleep, not because they want to resist, but because their biology has been misled. On the other hand, families who introduce dim, warm lighting in the evening, who reduce exposure to screens after sunset, and who ensure their child receives natural daylight in the morning, report smoother sleep transitions and calmer nights. Light does not only illuminate, it speaks to the nervous system. Warm, predictable light says, "You are safe, it is time to rest." Harsh, irregular light says, "Stay alert, the world is unpredictable." Light also carries emotional associations. A softly lit room creates a sense of intimacy and safety, while a glaring, overly bright environment communicates urgency. Babies register these atmospheres instinctively. When they open their eyes to gentle light, their nervous system relaxes. When they are confronted with harsh contrasts, they become agitated. By treating light as emotional care, parents transform their homes into sanctuaries of regulation. The texture trap: touch is the first sense to develop in the womb, and it remains one of the most powerful ways babies interact with the world. Yet many caregivers overlook the importance of textures. Fabrics, surfaces, toys, all these communicate safety or irritation directly through the skin. Rough or synthetic materials, tags that scratch, or toys with overly stimulating textures can create subtle discomforts that the baby cannot articulate but constantly feels. These irritations become hidden stressors, shaping the child's baseline state of unease. Research in sensory integration therapy confirms that children exposed to uncomfortable or inconsistent textures show higher levels of stress and difficulty self-regulating. The skin, as the body's largest organ, is in constant dialogue with the nervous system. Every fabric that touches the baby, every surface they crawl on, every object they grasp sends messages. When those messages are soothing soft cotton, natural wood, smooth surfaces, the body relaxes. When they are irritating, the body braces itself. Parents often misinterpret fussiness during clothing changes or playtime as personality quirks. In reality, the child may simply be reacting to textures that feel harsh or overwhelming. The nervous system, flooded with tactile input it perceives as unpleasant, sends signals of distress, crying, squirming, refusal to settle. Adjusting the environment, choosing breathable fabrics, removing irritating tags, offering natural textures can resolve these struggles almost instantly. The trap of texture lies in its invisibility. Adults may not notice what feels uncomfortable to the delicate skin of a baby. What is tolerable to us can be overwhelming to them. Becoming aware of this principle allows caregivers to design tactile environments with intention, ensuring that every touch communicates calm. In doing so, they build a sensory foundation of trust. Smells that disrupt bonding. Scent is directly linked to memory and emotion through the limbic system, the brain's center for emotion and survival. For babies, smell is one of the earliest anchors of security. The familiar scent of the mother, the natural fragrance of home, the smell of clean skin, these are signals of belonging and safety. When artificial fragrances intrude, candles, sprays, detergents, air fresheners, they confuse this imprinting. The baby's brain receives conflicting messages. What should be familiar is masked. What should be safe is overpowered. Studies in environmental health warn against constant exposure to synthetic fragrances, especially in nurseries. These substances can irritate the respiratory system, but even beyond physical health, they disrupt bonding. A baby calms when immersed in the natural scent of their caregiver. When this is masked by perfumes or chemicals, the olfactory system loses its compass. The child may appear restless or unsettled, not because of hunger or discomfort, but because the anchor of safety has been diluted. Natural smells like clean fabrics, wood, or the scent of nature through an open window create a sense of grounding. Artificial scents, even those marketed as calming, often achieve the opposite. They overwhelm rather than soothe. By choosing neutrality and authenticity in scent, parents allow their child to connect more deeply, to recognize their caregiver, and to feel secure in the invisible atmosphere of home. Temperature fluctuations as hidden stressors. Babies cannot regulate their body temperature as efficiently as adults. This makes them especially vulnerable to fluctuations. A room that swings from warm to cold or feels drafty at night creates constant stress for the nervous system. The baby's body responds with restlessness, shallow sleep, or irritability. Parents often attribute these signs to hunger or temperament, when the real culprit is environmental instability. Research shows that infants sleep more deeply and wake less often when kept in thermally stable environments. Even small variations, just a few degrees, can disturb the delicate balance of comfort. Temperature is not just about physical comfort, it communicates safety. A stable temperature says, the world is consistent, you can relax. An inconsistent one says, prepare for change, stay alert. Caregivers can support regulation by maintaining steady warmth, avoiding drafts, and dressing the baby appropriately for the season. It is not about creating artificial perfection, but about reducing extremes. Consistency is the gift. A child who rests in stable temperatures grows with a body that trusts the world around it. The role of parental energy reflected in space. Spaces hold more than objects. They hold energy. Parents may design a nursery with care. Yet if they enter that room in a state of constant stress, rushed routines, anxious feeding times, hurried diaper changes, the baby absorbs not only the sensory elements but also the emotional atmosphere. Babies are attuned to energy long before they understand words. The way a parent breathes, moves, and inhabits the space becomes part of the environmental message. Environmental psychology suggests that human energy imprints itself on the atmosphere of a room. Spaces used with calm intention feel different from spaces used with tension. Babies, with their sensitive nervous systems, register this difference immediately. A nursery designed with beauty but filled with anxious routines becomes a stage for stress. A modest room filled with calm, mindful presence becomes a sanctuary. The physical space reflects the emotional energy that inhabits it. This awareness calls parents to presence. The way they move through the environment, the pace of their actions, the quality of their attention, all these shape the baby's sense of safety. When caregivers slow down, breathe deeply, and create rituals of calm, the room itself becomes healing. It is not the decor but the energy that makes the difference. The time factor in space design. Space is not static. It unfolds in time. The rhythms of how a space is used matter as much as its design. Babies thrive on predictability, on patterns that align with their biological rhythms. When environments are used irregularly, screens on late at night, overstimulation before naps, chaotic transitions, the nervous system becomes confused. Chronobiology studies confirm that infants exposed to consistent daily rhythms show stronger emotional regulation, better sleep, and more secure attachment. Time and space is about routine. Morning light entering at the same hour, evening rituals that signal rest, consistent feeding areas that reinforce safety. These rhythms create an environment that communicates order. Without them, the space may feel visually calm, but temporally chaotic. Babies need both. Time gives the nervous system orientation. Predictability tells the body, life is safe, you can grow. Micro spaces of safety, even within busy households or small apartments. Intentional micro spaces can transform a child's experience. A simple corner with soft light, a basket of carefully chosen toys, a mat with natural textures. These micro spaces act as anchors of calm. Research in therapeutic design shows that such intentional zones reduce stress and promote self-regulation in children. For babies, who rely entirely on their environment for cues, these spaces whisper predictability. It is not about size or luxury. It is about intention. A calm corner is a signal. Here, nothing will overwhelm you. Here, the world slows down. By creating even the smallest sanctuary, caregivers teach the baby that safety can always be found, even in a noisy world. These micro spaces are gifts of stability, shaping resilience one moment at a time. Nature as the silent regulator. Nature regulates effortlessly. The presence of plants, natural textures, flowing water, or sunlight anchors the nervous system in rhythms older than civilization. Studies in biophilic design confirm that children exposed to natural elements show lower stress hormones, improved sleep, and greater emotional balance. For babies, even a view of trees outside a window can provide orientation and calm. The sounds of birds, the texture of wood, the feel of grass, these are not luxuries but essential regulators. They remind the body of its place in a larger order. By bringing nature into the nursery through plants, natural fabrics, or access to outdoor light, parents align their child's nervous system with harmony. Nature does not demand attention. It offers it freely, grounding the child in peace. Reframing environment as emotional care. Designing a baby's environment is often treated as decoration, but in truth it is emotional care. Every decision, colors, sounds, textures, rhythms speaks to the child long before language. Pediatric psychology and neuroarchitecture converge on this truth. Environments shape attachment, resilience, and emotional intelligence. When caregivers see environment as emotional care, they shift from styling a nursery to shaping a nervous system. They recognize that the baby is learning from the room as much as from the parent. A calm environment says, life is predictable, you are safe. A chaotic one says, be alert, the world is unstable. This reframing transforms design from aesthetics to an act of profound love. Impactful conclusion, the environment as the first embrace. The first embrace a baby feels each day is not only in the arms of a parent, but in the space that surrounds them. The walls, the light, the sounds, the air, they all hold the child before human touch arrives. The environment is the invisible caregiver, shaping the nervous system moment by moment. When parents choose awareness, they realize that every element of the home is speaking. It can whisper peace or shout chaos. It can create trust or instill anxiety. By removing hidden triggers of stress and replacing them with signals of safety, they transform the environment into the first language of love. A baby raised in calm spaces grows into a child whose nervous system knows serenity, into an adult who carries resilience and trust into the world. This is the power of environment. It is not decoration, it is destiny. And by embracing this truth, parents give their children a foundation stronger than any gift, an inner world shaped by peace, nurtured by intention, and anchored in love.